to the Shared Knowledge Conference. Once again, our opportunity to share knowledge beyond our department and our college to the entire UNM community, as well as the local non-academic community. One of the most important pieces of our students' research is communicating it to the people who can learn and benefit from what they've accomplished. Think of a sound bite. That little fragment you see on the nightly news that distills the essence of a complicated topic. Students are about to have the opportunity to distill their research and scholarship into a 3-minute LoboBite, a 3-minute thesis. So as part of our final competition, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the origin of the 3-minute thesis. It was trademarked as the 3MT and was developed in 2008 at the University of Queensland in Australia. The graduate dean, Alan Lawson, was inspired by the 3-minute shower that was necessitated by a severe drought. Since that time, the idea of 3-minute theses have spread to universities across the globe. Some universities strictly adhere to the guidelines provided by Queensland and refer to their competition as the 3MT. Others, such as UNM, refer to the competition by another name, allowing for deviation from the Queensland rules. For our final LoboBites competition, we have the top 3 candidates from 4 heats that were held earlier today. As with the heats, the presenters are in random order. Our non-academic judging panel will score on a 5-point scale for each criterion: significance, clarity, delivery, and engagement. The students already know how the timer works. It'll start on the first verbal utterance by the contestant, and time will be called at 3 minutes. So with that, let me go ahead and get us started. Our first presenter is Camille Velarde, who's a doctoral student in communication.
One out of 5 people will experience mental illness like anxiety or depression in any given year. So that means it could be me, it could be you, it could be you, and so on. 1 in 25 people will experience serious mental illness like bipolar disorder or schizoaffective disorder in any given year. So in a room like this, that could be me and somebody else. Now don't worry, I won't point you out, but why would we be concerned if people knew that this was our health status? Well, it's stigma and stereotypes, and these things exist in part because of the mainstream media's long-held depiction of people with mental illness as being dangerous and unpredictable, or typecast as the villains or comic relief in film and television. This, This is damaging because people don't seek treatment when they need it because they're afraid of being typecast with the stigma and stereotype. And so people forego seeking treatment for far too long or until something serious happens. And so now the mainstream media has competition. Social media. Social media has the potential to present a variety of images and stories of living with mental illness. And so that's what I set out to find. I scoured Instagram and I found all of the people who self-identified as having a serious mental illness like schizoaffective disorder, and I found that the stories that they presented were quite different than from that we've been given by the mainstream media. Now, the most commonly occurring story is that of hope. Now, people presenting a story of hope, their life is typical in every single way, with the exception of their diagnosis. So it sends a message that recovery is possible. The second most commonly occurring story is that of journey. Now these people, they share their struggles and their joys, and they really tell us about their story trying to reach recovery. Now the least commonly occurring was that of despair. Now these people were commonly anonymous posters, and they shared their pain and their loneliness. But I remain optimistic because regardless of the stories being told, everybody received positive social support. And that's good because people will be encouraged when they see these alternative stories and narratives to seek treatment when they need help. So what we've learned is that social media provides a variety of stories for us to see of living with mental illness, and that decreases the stigma and lowers negative stereotype and encourages people to seek treatment when they need help. Thank you.
So just like before, I'll ask you some of the same questions I asked you before, just to give our judges time to get the scoring done. So Camille, tell us where you're from.
I'm from Cuba, New Mexico. Yes.
And what brought you to Albuquerque?
Well, university, yeah, the university.
And would you like to give a shout out to your advisor?
Tamar Genesor, she's not here. Oh, she's at a conference, yes.
Okay, very good. And what is one of the things that started your interest in this?
Well, I've been interested in decreasing stigma and stereotypes for mental illness for a long time. Somebody very close to me deals with this, and I can't fix that person, but I can try to fix the world, and I know that's a little bit optimistic, but that's the stance that I take.
Great, thank you so much, Camille. So our next presenter is Juan Diego Colmenares Fernandez, who is a doctoral student in mechanical engineering.
Some people say we need to save the environment. Others say the environment doesn't need saving. But we can all agree on one thing. We all like to save money. One way to do that is by using vehicles that consume less fuel. Another way of doing it is by having more efficient ways of producing energy, making energy cheaper. Now, this is where accurate prediction of turbulent flows is important, because turbulent flows can affect the operation of vehicles, the efficiency of machines, and of certain chemical processes. But what are turbulent flows? What is turbulence? All of us think of turbulence when we're on a plane, and certainly, whoa, right? It's scary, but turbulence is more than that. Turbulence is when a fluid, which could be like water or like air, moves in a very random and chaotic manner, and making it very difficult to predict its movement. And this is actually the case in most engineering applications. Turbulent flows have been studied for many years using experiments. But thanks to the increase in computational power in the last few decades, it's become possible to perform highly accurate simulations of turbulent flows. And one advantage of these simulations is that we can obtain data that would be very difficult or even impossible to obtain from experiments. So in my simulation, I'm simulating the mixing between two parallel streams, both carrying different velocities. They're initially separated by a plate. Once the plate is removed, they start interacting and forming what's called turbulent mixing layers. This type of flow is present in many applications, for example, inside an engine or at the wake of a wind turbine. This is why they're so important. These simulations are being conducted using supercomputers at NASA, and we're gathering statistical data that will provide a full description of this flow. So the knowledge that will be obtained from this analysis can be used in the future for producing more efficient vehicles, for example, by understanding better how the mixing occurs inside of an engine. Also, for example, to increase power output from a wind farm by understanding how the wake from one wind turbine can develop and interact with other wind turbines. So those are some examples of how this study will have a positive impact in the automotive, aerospace, and energy sectors by reducing costs and also having lowering environmental impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Tell us where you're from.
I'm from Venezuela.
And what brought you to UNM?
My advisor, I met her through emails from I studied in Colombia, and over there, my advisor put me in contact with my current advisor, and she invited me to be part of this program.
And who is it?
She's Dr. Svetlana Poroseva from the Department of Mechanical Engineering.
Great. Anything about New Mexico surprise you?
Yes, so as I said earlier, I was surprised of how friendly people are. I don't know, maybe because of the movies, you sometimes think people in America could be standoffish or something like that, but I was surprised of how friendly people were.
Great. Thank you so much, Juan.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is James Fluke, who is a master's student in civil engineering.
So your poop is mostly bacteria. It's about 60% by mass. It's a pleasant subject, right? Well, there's a reason poop isn't that pleasant. It contains pathogenic bacteria and viruses that can make us really sick. We probably already all knew that. But did you know that fecal contamination is the single largest cause of unsafe waters in the US? 178,000 miles of river and stream is considered a health risk due to fecal contamination. That includes the Rio Grande near Albuquerque. We don't want that because it's a public health risk and it means spending tax money to assess and reduce that health risk. So let's frame the problem. We sample water from the river, and in that water we measure the amount of bacteria called E. coli, which originate in the digestive tract. We do that by growing them on a petri dish and counting them. We assume that those bacteria got to the river as poop, so we try to identify and reduce that source of poop to the river. Seems like a great plan. Let's go. These three top sources are the main ones we know of. We already treat our sewage to really clean levels. We don't want to stop wildlife from pooping, and we can't. We think storm runoff is the main problem. Albuquerque has spent $20 million over the past decade on infrastructure to treat stormwater runoff before it gets to the river, but we haven't seen bacteria reduced a bit. So there's something wrong with our approach. Now, imagine me in the lab measuring these bacteria, growing them on a plate, counting them. They're really smelly. I'm watching them grow in the lab, and I'm thinking, could this happen out in nature? They like warm temperatures. The summer, water gets really warm. There's lots of algae growing, lots of biology in that mucky, stinking mud. If those fecal bacteria grow in the stream bed, then what we measure in the river does not represent the sum of the inputs. And that has huge implications for how we assess fecal contamination. I measured fecal bacteria in the river water and the sediment frequently at 6 different places near Albuquerque, and I found that E. coli in the sediment is often 10 times higher or more than in the water above it on a mass basis. I also found that E. coli correlates positively with temperature. High temperature, high E. coli. So when there's more bacteria in the stream bed than the river water, and temperature is the main control of the system, that stream bed looks a lot like an incubator for bacteria. Now, that's pretty much impossible to prove categorically because the river's too big and there's too many unknowns, but my work is a step towards showing, hey, we have to acknowledge that the stream bed is the source of those fecal bacteria so that we can come up with more accurate ways of tracking fecal contamination so we stop spending tax money, $20 million over a decade, where it's not effective. Thank you.
So James, tell us where you're from.
I'm from the wonderful town of Bernalillo, just 12 miles north of here.
And tell us why it's good to stay around here and stay at UNM.
Well, we have really great natural resources such as the river, the Jemez here, and we have really great local people that are so glad to get involved with our students researching here, so that's a lot of fun. You can really get into the real world.
And some of our international students have complained that we're not near the sea. Do you want to tell them something about the Rio Grande?
Well, I go rafting all the time, and I've never gotten sick from the river. So it's a great place to have fun. We also have great mountains.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
So am I correct that Deborah's not here? I know she was concerned about a class, so maybe she'll slip in a little later. So our next presenter is Peron Keita Mendiola. She's a doctoral student in cell biology and physiology.
Are any of you familiar with the smell of rotten eggs? I bet many of you are. Well, I'm here today to tell you about the gas responsible for this smell, hydrogen sulfide. So why should any of us care about hydrogen sulfide? Aside from being a colorless gas with a foul odor, hydrogen sulfide is naturally produced in our bodies and has many different effects, including protecting our cells from oxidative damage, as well as regulating blood pressure. In fact, recent studies have shown a dramatic loss in hydrogen sulfide in diseases like diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, certain forms of cancers, and high blood pressure. So are there any ways we can increase hydrogen sulfide production in our bodies to combat disease? This is the premise of my project. Now, how exactly is hydrogen sulfide produced in our bodies? We need two things. For one, specific compounds which can be found in garlic as well as other vegetables. And two, more importantly, what I'll be focusing on, an active enzyme. In our blood vessels, the active enzyme cystathionine gamma lyase, or CSE for short, makes most of the hydrogen sulfide. Once produced in our bodies, hydrogen sulfide causes blood vessels to dilate or open up to allow blood flow into our tissues and organs, making hydrogen sulfide a very important gas in our bodies. Now, if you recall, we need specific compounds found in garlic and an active CSE enzyme to produce hydrogen sulfide. But what exactly activates CSE? This is not fully understood, and thus my project aims to uncover activators of CSE so that we can develop therapeutics to increase hydrogen sulfide production and combat disease. Some studies have shown that an increase in calcium activates CSE. However, follow-up studies have not confirmed this finding, and thus there is no consensus to what role calcium plays in regulating CSE. Using calcium as the first candidate for our project, our question was, does calcium activate CSE? What we found is that an increase in calcium does in fact activate CSE. I cannot tell you how exactly calcium activates CSE, but this will be the topic of future experiments. The findings of this study brings us one step closer in advancing medicine's ability to delay or prevent damage to our blood vessels caused by diseases like hypertension and diabetes. Thank you.
Peron Keita, tell us where you're from.
I'm from Ponape, Micronesia. It's an island in the Pacific.
And how long have you been here?
About 8 years now, so Albuquerque's pretty much home.
So did I ask you red or green before?
Yes, and I said Christmas.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can you tell us one of the things you enjoy about being here?
I like all the outdoor stuff you have. There's a lot of hiking in the Sandias, and many of you might not know, but there's these trees that have little medallions on them, so it's fun to do a scavenger hunt while you're hiking up there.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Our next contestant is Mel Amira. He's a master's student in dance.
Ghanaian traditional dance is a major means of transmission of oral tradition and indigenous knowledge across generations. Ghanaian dances or Ghanaian traditional dance are dances that existed in Ghana before colonialism. My research asks why Ghanaian traditional dances are not a subject on the curriculum of the elementary and high schools in Ghana where students can learn these beautiful traditions because they will go to the university and they will learn this dance. The university is a living symbol of colonial legacy. To address this question, I am interested in studying the condition under which Ghanaian traditional dances has been placed within an European introduced system of education, my research focuses on the implications and challenges associated with placing indigenous knowledge in a Western-oriented system. This research, I will intend to document the pedagogical principles of incorporating traditional dance forms in Ghanaian universities in Ghana. This research will attempt to illuminate the labor of oral tradition and bearing witness to how these dances are important to us as people and our identity and a sense of belonging. Methodologically, it will extend the boundaries of traditional research. It will also provide an indication and a point of reference for dancing educators and traditional leaders in the field of performing arts. Its contribution to this research consists of theoretical nexus of explaining how traditional dances can be articulated in our community. This will also allow me to know the basic rationale why the government of Ghana hasn't included these beautiful Ghanaian traditional dances in the curriculum in our schools in Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, in the practice of modernity and colonialism in which these dances have been marginalized, these dances and their musical traditions face extinction in our humanity. Thank you.
So Mel, are you from Ghana?
Yes, ma'am.
And what brought you to the University of New Mexico?
Schooling. I came here because I was looking through all the schools in America, and I got to know that University of New Mexico satisfied my needs. So I promptly applied, and I was lucky to be here.
And I think, if I remember your answer before, do you want to give a shout out to your advisor?
I want to give a shout out to my advisors, and importantly, two of my advisors who are my mom are here. They are Professor Amanda and Professor Marianne Hall sitting right there. And I wouldn't say they are my supervisors, but they are my mom, and they make me feel comfortable over here.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Our next speaker is Kelly Cardozo da Silva. She is a master's student in Portuguese studying Brazilian literature and culture.
I'm talking about human rights, social justice, female black identities, Afro-Brazilian literature, and resistance. I'm talking about Brazil, but it could be about other countries, about the repressive politics in many societies, about black women who resignify identities, about many other ethnic groups that resist. I'm talking about history. Since the colonial period, marked by violence, but it was also marked by resistance. It was not a peaceful time. And black women are talking about this so loud. Black women poets like Cristiane Sobral. When she tells us what she does not wish, in 2001 she said, I will no longer do the dishes. This is such a way to say, I resist. We have another poet, Conceição Evaristo, that in different ways tells us, I'm a black woman and I resist. Back in 1990, she was already making some noise, talking about different generations, talking about women's voices. And I'm telling you that black women have rights. Black women from different societies, and they should claim these rights to construct subjectivities and work against stereotypes. And Evaristo's and Sobral's poems demonstrate how literature can function as a tool that symbolically questions historically oppressive roles, and about Black community issues. And this type of literature operates as a forum to claim for human rights and works to problematize repressive and exploitative social practices that you can see in Brazilian society. And all of this is about people who resist, about women, about mothers, sisters, friends, colleagues, about students and poets, about women who work hard, about literature and poetry as resistance, about voices that scream every day for human rights. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Where are you from?
Brazil, the capital, Brasilia.
And what brought you to UNM?
The program in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese because it's possible to work with Black women and literature.
And do you want to tell us something that you like about Albuquerque?
Yes, I really like the different people that you have here. This is amazing, and it's about what I'm working with. So I really like this here in Albuquerque.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Next, we have Christabel de Souza, doctoral student in cancer biology.
According to the World Health Organization, cancer is the leading cause of death, giving rise to an 8.8 million mortality rate worldwide. This disease is characterized by malignant growth or tumor progression, which is caused due to unchecked cell division of abnormal cells. Cancer cells ignore the signals that tell your normal cells to stop growing. TP53 is a gene which is called the guardian of the genome because it acts as a tumor suppressor in normal cells, which means that TP53 protects the normal cell from undergoing uncontrolled cell division. Mutations in this tumor suppressor or genetic variations are found to be highly associated with cancer progression. These mutations are of two types. One, they can be inherited genetic variations, which are race and population specific, or they can be sporadic mutations that are accumulated in an individual's genome over their lifetime. The mutant TP53 gene can now no longer function as a tumor suppressor, but gains a cancer-promoting function and now acts as an oncogene. Hence, your guardian of your genome has now gone rogue. So where do we come in? We work on high-grade serous ovarian cancer, which is the most lethal form of ovarian cancer. Why? Because even though TP53 is mutated in almost all types of cancers, this type of ovarian cancer has a TP53 mutation rate of 96%. We aim to target this mutant P53 in order to find better therapeutics and better diagnostic measures in order to study cancer progression. We believe that every individual has a fair chance to fight cancer, and targeting mutant TP53 for better diagnostics and more efficient specific anti-cancer therapy is the need of the hour. So, can we overcome this devastating disease called cancer? Yes, we can. But if every individual is looked at on a unique basis by allowing individualized precision medicine to provide us with a genomic blueprint in order to look at the risk factors that are associated with every individual and check to see if they have a susceptibility to cancer progression. As healthcare scientists, we have the responsibility to lead the transformation in therapeutics in order to bring better anti-cancer therapy which is more specific and efficacious to the patient. Because at the end of the day, cancer survived is a life revived. Thank you for your time.
Christabel, tell us where you're from.
All right, so I'm originally from India, but I was a doctoral student at Kansas Medical Center, and then my mentor moved to the Comprehensive Cancer Center here at UNM, and so I moved with him to Albuquerque, like 2 months back.
And we're glad you did. Can you tell us something that you like about Albuquerque compared to Kansas, maybe?
That's hard. No, I'm just kidding. So I really like the mountains. When I'm driving home in the evening, I can see the sky and the mountains merge together, and I think that's just gorgeous because Kansas doesn't have mountains, so yeah.
Thank you so much. Our next contestant is Cava MOFA. I'm going to start over. Cava MOFA, doctoral student in history.
In an Albuquerque mayoral debate last night, candidates Tim Keller and Dan Lewis were asked where on their priority lists mental health care and treatment falls among other problems. Both answered that they would prioritize hiring more police. Neither mentioned mental health care at all in their answers. Politicians, just like most of us, want to solve problems efficiently, but they often fail to look back to past interventions and the roots of our problems. I'm working with UNM's History Department and the College of Population Health to historicize the problem of mental illness in New Mexico and help inform policy going forward to make long-term impacts instead of putting Band-Aids on severe wounds. In 2010, the Department of Housing and Urban Development reported to Congress that approximately 46% of U.S. homeless population suffers from severe mental illness and addiction. Our potential mayors are calling for increased police intervention. That's nothing new. In 1891, Mary Teets, who was on the Women's Christian Temperance Union Board for Prison and Jail Reform, walked into the jail in Las Vegas, New Mexico, where she found 4 prisoners deemed to be insane, one of whom had been there for 18 years without treatment. The Gilded Age territorial legislature, like their contemporaries, saw a world fueled by profits and run by technocrats, where struggling citizens were an inconvenience. They'd read in the Las Vegas Optic and other newspapers about insane citizens wandering the streets and crowding the jails, so they approved the creation of the New Mexico Insane Asylum in 1889, but it took a decade to build. Even then, politicians charged with getting the ill off the streets bumped heads with the new discipline of psychiatry and the everlasting fight for institutional funding. Through the Gilded Age, mental illness treatment was much like other illnesses. Someone would go into a hospital for a couple weeks, get better, and then go home. It was rehabilitation. Then in the 1920s, it changed to the long-term institutionalization we saw in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That riled hippie-era ideals and pushed 70s policy toward freedom and against warehousing the mentally ill. Then in the Reagan era, funding of mental health care was reduced significantly. Now, many of those with severe mental illness are living in boxes, panhandling, and generally hopeless. We've come full circle as far as our mental health care policy goes. Police intervention and jail time will not solve our problems with mental illness now, just as those did not solve our problems 150 years ago. We need to historicize our social problems to find new solutions and not repeat past mistakes. Otherwise, New Mexicans who need help might as well be living in the Gilded Age. Thank you.
Cava, tell us where you're from.
I grew up in Phoenix, but I couldn't take the heat.
Blame you.
Yeah.
It's nice this time of year. What got you interested in this subject?
Well, gee, okay. I went to college the first time. I got my bachelor's degree in journalism and then started working with KUNM Radio, where they have an endowment-funded public health reporting team. I was a little frustrated with journalism because I wanted to tell longer, better stories. So I thought history was the place for me. But I kind of carried over those public health interests. I was really inspired by the work some of those journalists were doing.
Great.
So
And
here
I
I am.
have to ask you because you said something really nice about being in Albuquerque before, so maybe you could say what you like about Albuquerque again.
Oh, it's absolutely the people. the strong sense of community here, the inclusiveness. I love it. I love how friendly everyone is. You know, I can never go back to big city after living here. This is home now.
Thank you, Cave.
Yeah.
Our next presenter is Jourdan James. He's a doctoral student in Organization, Information, and Learning Sciences.
So put yourself in these shoes. You're a first-generation college student, the first one in your family to go to college. You figured out what you want to be when you grow up, and you figured out the degree that's going to get you there. Now, during your first year of coursework is generally when you get the history of your degree program, and this is where you really come to understand where your degree comes from and how it relates to other degrees. Your second year of coursework is when you get introduced to a lot of theory, and this is where you come to understand why you do the things that you do and the ways that you do them. Now, during your third year of coursework is traditionally when you start to get into some projects, and you take these first couple of years of history and theory and you start to design projects for coursework. Then comes the big one, the fourth year, senior year, graduation is in sight. Now, during this year, the type of coursework that you do starts to connect you to the work that you'll be doing when you graduate, and you start to get a sense of what kind of jobs you may be doing for the rest of your life. And this is when you come to the moment that this is not what I want to be when I grow up. And herein lies the problem, is that currently right now, the way that many degree programs are taught is we are inadequately connecting students with the work they're doing in the classroom to the work that they'll actually be doing when they graduate. And this is a really tough situation to be in, because usually in your fourth year of college, you only got a couple options to you. You could either drop out, you could either go ahead and get a degree that you never plan on using, or you may decide to change degrees. And this is problematic because when you change degrees, it may take an extra year to 3 years of coursework to get a second degree. Now, I currently right now, besides being a full-time PhD student, teach at the School of Architecture and Planning. If you're not familiar with this, think of it this way. Architects design buildings, landscape architects design what goes around the buildings, and we urban planners, we design the entire rest of the city. We designed your communities, we designed your shopping centers, we designed the schools where your kids go, when we designed all the transportations that connect all these things. So what my research does here at UNM is I provide opportunities for my students from year one to be connected to the design challenges that exist for these professionals once they actually graduate from college. And the results of this are quite surprising. What it is that students actually end up developing a very early sense of professional identity. And what this allows them to do is this allows them to persist all the way through college and the entire time be able to connect the coursework that they're doing with the job that they'll actually have when they're done. Now, why is this important? Considering that almost all of my students will go into communities where you live to do professional work, is it more important that I create faceless business professionals that go into your communities and only use theory and history to address problems in your neighborhood? Or do you want diverse, dynamic students who are capable of handling interesting, real-world problems? Thank you.
Jourdan, where are you from?
So bonjour everybody, my name is Jourdan and I was born and raised in the backwoods of Minnesota in the middle of freaking nowhere on this tiny little Indian reservation. You may know my people as either Ojibwe, Chippewa, or Anishinaabe.
And what brought you to New Mexico?
So when you grow up in Minnesota and there's snow on the ground 8 months out of the year, and you come to the idea that you can go to someplace new that's really sunny and doesn't have those problems, you become really interested in coming to New Mexico.
Great. Thank you so much, Jourdan.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Jennifer Van Osdol, who's a master's student in civil engineering.
Up on the screen, you'll find a picture that I took at a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. Did you know that statistically speaking, about 40% of the water you'll drink today started as fluffy white snow up in the Rockies? We don't get to see snow very often here in Albuquerque, but we depend on it to keep our parks green and our showers running. And it's not just us. A 2015 study found that nearly 2 billion people around the world live in snow-sensitive areas, meaning that A, their water supply depends on snow, and B, that snow supply is in jeopardy due to climate change. Therefore, it's really important that we understand the connection between snow and our rivers, and the first step is simply to be able to measure that snow. The first kind of snow measurement is known as snow water equivalent. Imagine you're on a mountainside with a camping stove, a pot, and a shovel. You can shovel a column of snow, put it in the pot, and start the stove. The amount of water in the pot after all of the snow has melted is known as the snow water equivalent of that snow. But this becomes difficult when you have to go into treacherous areas such as this to get those measurements. Now imagine that you're flying in a plane high above the snowy peaks like I was in this picture. You can see for miles, and you can see just how much of the land is covered in snow, but you can't tell how deep it is. We've traded detail for coverage. This is called snow cover extent, and I'm proposing it as an alternative to snow water equivalent in these treacherous regions. So, does it tell us anything useful? To answer that question, I asked 3 more. First, does it relate to snow water equivalent itself? The answer is yes. Although the relationship is complex, it has significant physical meaning, and it replicates studies done in the Alps. Question number 2. Does snow cover extent behavior change as we move from the frigid upper Rockies down to the warm Sandias? And the answer is again, yes. Snow cover extent increases under colder temperatures, meaning that snow cover extent is capturing what we would expect to see, more snow in colder environments. The final question, does snow cover extent tell us something meaningful about how snow gets to our rivers? Fortunately, the answer to this question is once again, yes. As snow cover extent decreases in the spring, the amount of water in our rivers increases. This means that snow cover extent is capturing some part of the process of snow melting from our mountains to our rivers and eventually to our faucets. The biggest advantage of snow cover extent is that it is freely and readily available across nearly the entire globe. This makes it the perfect opportunity to be able to do snow research in treacherous, far-flung, and remote regions such as this, where we simply have no other options. Thank you.
So Jennifer, where are you from?
Also from Minnesota, although more of a city gal. So.
And what brought you to UNM?
My now husband moved here for Sandia, so I decided to go back to school, and I'm so glad I ended up here.
And why are you so glad you ended up here?
I've gotten some really great opportunities. I've gotten to go to Nepal for research and school activities 3 times. I've been able to be involved in research like this, and I just love it here.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And our final presenter for our final is Erin Chappell. She is a doctoral student in biology.
Very quickly, raise your hand if you know mosquitoes can carry disease. Now, keep your hand up if you know snails can carry disease. That's a lot fewer people. But it's true, snails carry parasites that infect hundreds of millions of people around the world. And some of these diseases we know quite a bit about, for example, snail fever. But what about everything else? That is Cornuaspersum, better known as the common garden snail. And I personally think it rocks. It does a lot of good. It's an easily farmed food source. It's used in anti-aging spa treatments, and the mucus is found in quite a lot of cosmetics. But it also does a lot of bad. It carries parasites that attack plants, animals, and humans. And like most farmed mollusks, can suddenly die off, which can be very, very costly. It's also globally invasive and highly competitive. I didn't actually realize that there were other snails until I was in middle school. Each time this snail goes into a new environment, it encounters new pathogens it's never seen before, and it brings with it new diseases. As a snail, it has no adaptive immune system, so no white blood cells, no antibodies. But very clearly, it's doing something right because you can find it on every continent except Antarctica. My research focuses on these snails, starting with populations in Albuquerque. And so far, we found a few things. First, the genetic diversity of the snails here is limited. which means their immune response is likely limited, and they may be susceptible to pathogens as a form of biocontrol. Second, some parasites can be encased in the calcium matrix of the shell, sort of like a fly in amber, which leaves behind a record of parasites encountered. Third and last, their immune cells, called hemocytes, are a model for how cell-based immunity works and offers insights into our own immune systems. So while academically I think this is awesome, so what? My findings can lead to healthier snail farms, which lead to higher quality snails, whether you're going to be eating them with butter as escargot or putting them in the cosmetics that keep me looking young and adorable. But let's not forget, these snails carry diseases such as intestinal worms and liver flukes. Studying these host-parasite interactions leads to a better understanding and proactive rather than reactive prevention plans. With my work, we can prevent diseases and help to feed the world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Erin. Where are you from?
I'm actually from Las Cruces.
Well, we appreciate you coming up to the flagship university.
Thank you.
What brought you to UNM?
I came up here because I like quite a lot of the professors. I like a lot of the work that's doing here, and I was very honored to be able to work with one of the professors that inspired me.
Do you want to give a shout out to that professor?
Yes, to Dr. Kuhn Adama. He's my advisor, and I'm very honored to work with him.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
So while we're tallying things up, I would like to introduce our judges to you. We really appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to do this. So first of all, I'll start with Maria Griego-Raby, who is the Principal of Contract Associates and a former regent for UNM. Thank you. And if we have any journal readers out there, Jessica Dyer covers the UNM beat for us, so this is Jessica Dyer. And we are pleased to have Jim Novak from Sandia National Laboratories. And Janice Ruggiero, the Deputy Athletic Director for UNM. So thank you all very much for being here. A few other words of thanks. Tim Lowry is Associate Dean for Graduate Studies. Kyoko Simmons with the Honors College. They have been tallying things up all day. Bill Gannon with Graduate Studies has been running the timer all day. Christine Schell and Sue Wilder are graduate students at UNM that work with Graduate Studies, and they're the ones you received emails from. They have done an enormous amount of work to organize this. And then I would also like to thank Dana Allen, Vice President of Alumni Association. So Dana suggested to me, Julie, why don't you think about having your Shared Knowledge Conference at Hodgen Hall? And I think it's just been lovely that we've done this here. The ultimate goal for our presenters is to become alumni, so this helps you connect with the Alumni Association. And one more thank you and introduction. I'd like to invite our Provost Craig White up here. So Craig is going to be announcing our winners. And so third place.
Erin Watson Chappell.
So Erin, you will be getting a scholarship for that in the amount of $250. And I'll let you slide right over here, but you can stay up here. Our second place winner,
Christabel de Souza.
Congratulations. And before we do the first place winner, I believe we have the first place winner from last spring, if you want to raise your hand. So we're pleased to have you here. Now, our Our first place winner will actually be receiving a $1,000 scholarship. And on top of that, they get a trip to Las Vegas, Nevada to compete in a regional competition. So in March at the Western Association of Graduate Schools, there will be a regional competition that our first place winner will be participating in. So Provost White.
All right, drum roll, please. And the winner is Mr. James Fluke.
So who knew poop would do that for you? So congratulations to our winners. You can go ahead and stand over here. We'll get a picture or maybe a photograph opportunity. We are having a reception starting shortly, and so I invite everybody to stay. I really invite those of you that participated, get to know some of the other graduate students in other fields. I think you'll find that really rewarding. So thank you.
If I could say just a quick word, I think we should also give a thanks to Julie Coonrod for all the work she's done and her passion for this. Thank you, Julie. What a great event, highlighting everybody's research. Very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. Congratulations. We'll be in touch about everything.
How does it feel to become third place, and what do you do to prepare yourself?
It feels great to be in third place, especially with so many great great presentations that I listened to today. I prepared by really working to keep it in that nice that 3-minute time frame. I basically bored my roommates to tears with this presentation, just going over it over and over and over again.
What do you think about events like this? What does it mean? What do they mean to people like you?
I think it's a really good way for people to understand what we're doing here and for them to connect with the research that we do, as well as for them to open up doorways for community interactions.
What does it feel like to win, and what does it take to win?
I think for me, it took a lot of, I'm very passionate about my work, and I think that tends to show when you talk about it, even if it's 3 minutes. And it was a great experience watching other contestants and actually learning about what people in UNM are doing besides me. And I think that was more exhilarating than winning. So, but I'm happy I won too.
What does it take to win something like this, and what do you think about winning?
It took starting early and practicing lots of times, putting yourself in the shoes of the people that are listening to you, and it's a good exercise in communication, so it feels pretty good to know that I can communicate with people.
Anything else you'd like to add about this contest?
It sure is interesting to see what everybody has to show, and I really like learning from everybody, learn from everywhere, and it's fun, so.